Evan Davis, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed by Raw today. You've just given a talk to Warwick PPE Society about, sort of based on your book, Post-Truth, Why We Have Reached Peak Bullshit and What We Can Do. Can you just sort of, for people that weren't fortunate enough to be there today, can you sort of give your general thrust of what
the book is an investigation as to why there is so much bullshit in the world.
Yeah.
And in particular, why now in our political discourse. There's obviously enormous worry about post-truth, fake news, all of those things. So the book is, it's a sort of random walk through the world of bullshit, what it is, why there's so much of it. Of course, if you're a rational economics sort of guy, you think, well, there wouldn't be bullshit because people would see through it and wouldn't believe it. But of course, there is a lot of bullshit. So the book explains that, and I think that the sort of core thing of the moment and the sort of the worries about it, I think are deeply related to the very tribal politics and the very divided societies most Western countries are in at the moment. We're all basically sort of angry and feeling quite sort of, we have a team and we don't like the other team. Yeah. And that makes us very willing to believe things that suit our team or our team's line. Yeah. We'll believe anything bad about the other team. So we're in a world where that kind of bullshit, tribal bullshit is particularly prevalent at the moment.
You talked in your talk about what you call the Warren Buffett Rule, which you say you spoke to Warren Buffett and he basically said that essentially the truth will out.
Well, he said, I asked him why he didn't employ PR people. He said, well, there's no point because when you get to my age, he's quite elderly. Yeah. He said, when you get to my age, you just get the reputation you deserve. You know, that the PR people will do everything they can to sort of dress it up, but eventually everyone will just see through it. And I think it is a really important principle to live by. It may not always be true, by the way, but it's probably best to work on the assumption that the truth will come out eventually. You might get away with it, a few times.
A little bit, yeah.
But it'll probably come out in the end.
So post-truth is quite sort of a new word, and it's something that sort of entered our vocabulary probably since Trump, really. Do you think this is something that's here to stay, or do you, like you say, do you think that eventually people will turn away from that kind of politics?
Well, so on Trump, I think people will in the end, my guess is focus less on what he says and more on what he does and achieves or fails to achieve. And so my guess will be that his election chances in 2020 are dictated by actions rather than by his words. As for the sort of era in which we're sort of worried about fake news and lies in politics, I suspect if the divisions begin to ease and the tensions begin to diminish, I expect a lot of the bullshit will ease as well. Yeah. I think Trump's rhetorical style, which plays fast and loose with facts, I think his rhetorical style will wear thin as well. I think people get tired of it. I mean, it's sort of, I can even feel myself. I was laughing at some of them at first, and then it gets a bit tiresome.
Just wearing, doesn't
and it? And then you just shrug, and then so most communication techniques.
Yeah. So you feel a bit positive about the future.
Well, I feel that. Look, I don't know whether I'm not going to give a view on whether you should be optimistic about Trump or Brexit or any of those things, but I'm somewhat more positive than most people about public discourse and the fear that lies are going to sort of envelop us and we'll never have truth again. I mean, I actually think the public have more good sense than a lot of the commentators credit them with.
Now on a slightly different topic, obviously we're a student radio station, and so a lot of the people watching this will be members of the station, and a lot of them will want to do interviews of their own. You've obviously been a presenter on Today programme and on Newsnight. What are your sort of tips for a good interview? What makes a really sort of strong interview?
So there isn't a single form of strong interview, and that's the most important thing to remember, that there are 100 different ways of interviewing, and I personally, I've always enjoyed watching the adversarial interviews, the Paxman-Humphreys ones, but I don't think everyone should be doing that. Yeah. So the first thing is find your own groove and your own style, because don't be a Paxman if you're not a Paxman, and be a Paxman if you are a Paxman. So the first is you've got to be yourself, and I think that as a sort of interview tip is important. I think it's very important to work out before you go in what you think the central question or questions are.
Okay.
But having done that, what's also important is not to be so rigidly sticking to your written questions, and you've not been doing this, Jack, so this is not pointed at you. Don't stick so rigidly to your written questions that you don't listen to what the person says and then sort of alter accordingly. Because the worst thing is when they say something really interesting and you miss it.
And you just carry on with the interview anyway. Okay. Just quickly, obviously the BBC pay scandal has been a really big thing recently, and you yourself are on the BBC pay scale. Obviously you can't express like a public view on this, but is there anything that you would say, what do you think the solution might be?
Well, I think it's actually pretty difficult. The BBC have acknowledged publicly that they think there are cases where gender may have been a factor in people being paid unfairly. So the BBC has acknowledged the problem, and I think they're right to do so. I think I can probably go that far. And I've also said publicly, I don't think this is a question of sort of explicit bias. I think it's much more implicit biases. In a world where no one really knows what the right salary is for any of us, it's sort of like you look and say that looks right or looks wrong. And I think in a world where there's so few market benchmarks to use, it's very easy for implicit biases to bear on the decisions that are ultimately made. So how the BBC solves it, I think it's quite a tricky problem. But solve it they must, basically.
I thought we'd end on sort of two sort of lighter questions, having had quite a heavy one there. What would be your ideal interviewee, firstly? If you could interview anybody in the world right now, or even let's say historical figures as well.
Well, that's a very interesting one. I mean, the person who I'd like most to interview as of now is that North Korean newsreader who comes on and has a very fixed expression but a slight smile as she announces with great stridency the latest nuclear test.
Always
success.
cries very convincingly as well.
And I think she's just one of the most sort of interesting human beings. I mean, I'm genuinely fascinated in the psychology of North Korean people. Who I've read one or two books on it, and it's less of a kind of a country and more like really a camp in which a small number of people are actually keeping 20 million hostages, and it's the strangest and most dysfunctional place on earth by a long way. And I genuinely, to be able to find out what someone like she really believes would be my kind of current interview goal.
Never heard one like that before. Obviously, you've also hosted Dragon's Den. What was the standout pitch on that? Was there one that you remember in particular, or one that was like very, very good, or one
Dragon's
that was
Den? Honestly,
bad?
I've seen literally hundreds. I think, and I mean they are all shapes and sizes. I think the one I laughed most on was a guy who had a kind of lounge sofa that turned into a home gym, and everything came out of it. And it was
I don't remember that one.
I was literally falling on the floor.
How is it when you have to interview them afterwards about
Well,
these
I actually don't interview them now. In the early days, I very much did.
Okay.
And it was sometimes very awkward because they've come out of an experience, a real life moment. And it was difficult. The kind of one among the best ones, I think I actually do think that there was a guy called Rob Laws who came in with a thing called Trunky, which is a little children's suitcase. I remember that one. He had designed it himself, and it was. I thought it was one of the most impressive. Well, you just see them everywhere now. You go to an airport and there are kids rolling around on them. And I was really impressed with that. And he didn't even get the money actually on the day. No, but I thought that was one of the best.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Evan Davis.
Jack, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.